First off, I wanted to welcome you and welcome you not just to my channel, but also to the realm of chemistry. As you can tell, maybe if you look behind me, I am a chemist and I've been doing chemistry for many, many years. I have a PhD, I'm a professor, and I've been teaching students for literally decades. And I've seen a lot of what helps students succeed and what gets in their way. And so that's why I'm here, is to give you, from my perspective and from my conversations with students, when I ask them, what do you wish you had known before you started chemistry in college that would have helped you? And so here are where these tips come from both the students and then from me being the professor and grading the students, and then ultimately being the one who documents the grades that they earned, and seeing so many of them and correlating their behavior and their attitudes and their confidence with the grade that they do receive in the end. But even more importantly than that, how they feel about how they did in the end, regardless of what the grade was. So the tip number one that unanimously I think is helpful, and students have given me feedback that's helpful, is attending class regularly. But it's more than just being a warm body in the seat. It is actually engaging. And there are quite a few ways that you can engage. And one of them is being present, is listening, and note taking. But there's also the thinking about what is being said, thinking about those problems that are being posed in class. And hopefully, you are in a class where you are given the chance to carry out some of those problems in the class time, that you're not just always being talked to the whole time. Now, there are different styles of teaching, and so I do recognize that some of you will be in classes where it is 100% lecture and you are listening and taking notes. But even if that's the case, you can think through the problems that are being done, the examples that are being given, and think, does that make sense to me? Is that what I would have expected? Or is this confusing? And asking questions. Now, I do know that it can be very intimidating to ask questions during class. And some people can easily do it. Some people can force themselves to do it. And some people cannot get themselves to ask questions in class. So I am here to tell you that you can succeed just as well if you don't ask questions in class. Okay, so don't worry if you are that kind of person. I can relate because that was me. I never asked questions in class. I was worried about asking a stupid question or about being wrong or something like that. Now, actually, I wish I had asked more questions, because as it turns out, the question that you're thinking, there's a very good chance most of the people in the class are thinking the exact same question. So you might feel uncomfortable doing it, but you are doing everyone a favor if you do. That said, I understand if you don't ask the questions during class. Okay. But that leads me into tip number 2. So this is yet another tip that I believe works well, and so do my students. And that is taking time to talk to the professor. As I said, you can ask questions during class, but you don't need to. You can save them until after class. Class gets out, and if you don't have to rush off to another class or appointment or work, and if the professor has some time as well, that's a great time to ask a question because it's fresh for you and the professor has just talked about it. It's great feedback for the professor because then they see where they could have perhaps explained more or given another example. They might even start off the next class with a similar kind of question or example that you brought up, because then they would recognize that some of that perhaps wasn't clear. So then you get a double where you got the personalized answer and then you get to see it again, and that will lock it in for you. Office hours. You would not believe how many office hours a professor sits there by themselves. They have office hours waiting for students to arrive. And I will say, over the years, fewer and fewer students have been coming to my office hours. So, what better way for you to get individualized attention, get your questions answered right away from the professor than to attend office hours? Here's another example where it is often intimidating, I've been told, to attend a professor's office hour. So there's a couple ways that you can do it. And one is to bring along a buddy. That might help you just feel a little bit better and more supported. Another way is to walk from class with your professor to their office, chatting and talking about your questions. And then that brings you to their office, and already you might feel more comfortable than visiting them again in their office if you haven't already. Another way is brute force, really, is just making yourself go in. It is their office hours. And believe me, they love it. We love it when you visit our office hours. We are professors because we love to teach and we love to answer questions. So it is really a good space, a good place, and a good time to get questions answered. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of your professor, ask them questions before class. Oh, that's another time too. Getting there a little bit early and asking them questions before class. I would say do that only if your question is short. Oftentimes, the professor before class is preparing for class. Whether or not it's obvious, they're preparing in their mind, getting ready for a class to begin. But a quick question, no problem at all. Always feel free to ask. So before class, after class, and during office hours, talk to your professor. Okay, tip number 3. So much success with this one, and that is peer learning. Learning from your peers. This can be informal or formal. So you can put together an informal study group. This does mean that you will need to find other people in your class that are interested in doing that as well. And so sometimes this might take some time getting to know people in the class if you haven't already, and asking them, hey, do you want to get together before the homework assignment is due tomorrow evening? Get a couple people together and work on it together. Support each other. Maybe there are things you know that they don't, and vice versa. So those informal study groups are wonderful. Also, many classes have teaching assistants. You might have a teaching assistant in your chemistry lab who can actually help you with questions from lecture. Some lectures do have teaching assistants, and they may or may not be there in lecture every day. It totally depends on the university and how it's structured. But either way, even if you feel like, well, the chemistry teaching assistant for lab is not in the lecture. Well, the reason why they were chosen and hired to be a teaching assistant in lab is because they are good at chemistry. They have taken the chemistry lecture class before, and they can answer some of your questions. So if you're standing there in lab and maybe you're waiting for your experiment to warm up or something, that's a great time to ask your TA for some assistance with your homework or maybe clarification on a concept. Okay. You can also attend study sessions. So if your TA or a tutor or your professor is holding a study session, highly recommend you go. Even if you don't feel prepared, even if you haven't even started the homework assignment, so you're afraid of showing up and maybe thinking you're going to be the only one who doesn't know what's going on, that's where you can begin to see how problems are solved and feel more comfortable with the material. So all those are possible ways that you can engage in peer learning. Okay. Tip number 4. What was my tip number 4? Oh, yes. Keep up with the material. Okay, this one can be challenging sometimes, right? Because while you're taking chemistry, chances are you're doing other things in your life, right? Even if it seems like the professor seems like they feel like chemistry is the only class, of course it's not. And it's not the only thing that you're doing. You are probably also working, or you have volunteer work. There could be many things with your family. Okay, so keeping up can be a challenge. But if you can allot even a half an hour of time in a day to look over the material, to look ahead and read a little bit about what will be talked about in the next lecture. If you have a homework assignment, maybe it looks daunting, but take a moment to open it up and look at it. See what kinds of questions are being asked, even if you don't have the time to do them. This is going to give you continued exposure each day. And then when you do have time, a chunk of time, an hour or two to carve out and sit down and work on the material, it will feel more familiar and it will feel more doable. Okay, so keeping up on it. Now, I say keep up on the material, but life happens, right? And sometimes you can fall behind. And the worst part of falling behind a little bit is that it can become a spiral. And I've seen this happen so many times with students where you get a little bit behind and then you feel maybe embarrassed to come to the professor and ask questions about a homework assignment that's late. Well, I can tell you there's nothing that brings me greater joy than to see a student who's behind and who is putting in that effort to get caught up. Okay, there are a lot of things that bring me joy, but that is truly one of them. I do not judge you for getting behind. I get behind on things all the time. I'm behind on many things right now, today, but we are always doing our best. And we are all human, and your professors are human. I bet your professor is behind on something, at least one thing as well. So don't worry about that judgment because it's actually not as big as you might be imagining it is. So coming in and making an effort to get caught back up might not get you caught all the way back up that day, but it will take you a step further and help you make that jump that you need to get caught up and feeling better. Which brings me to my bonus. All right, this idea of how you're feeling about how you're doing and the confidence that you either have or you don't have with chemistry. This idea that chemistry is difficult is valid. And there are some people who the chemistry class seems to be easy for. But sometimes you don't know what their background is. It's possible that, for whatever reason, they've taken several chemistry classes before in their past. They just have more of a background. They've had more practice. It's the same with anything, right? It's the same with learning a language or learning a sport, learning how to play a new game. More practice, you'll get better at it. So if you are feeling like I'm not getting it and it seems so easy for them, this is where taking a step back and thinking, okay, this is hard for me, but chemistry is hard at first. And putting forth the effort to do your best, whatever your best looks like, that is going to help an enormous amount. Because often part of that spiral is due to how you are feeling about how you have done. If you feel like you have failed yourself or failed the professor, and those feelings can put up a wall and can stop you from moving forward. It is a process. And I have had students who failed an exam in the beginning of the semester, and by the end, they had brought their grade way up because they had thought, oh boy, I failed. Learned a lesson from that. How can I change my behavior? What can I do differently? What time can I put in? How can I prioritize my time? These are the questions that I saw them asking themselves that allowed them to ultimately succeed. Another thing that can happen is you can fail the course. That does not mean that you fail chemistry for the rest of your life at all. Here are other examples. I've had students fail a chemistry course, and they went on not only to get a degree in chemistry, but to have done things like invented game-changing, transformative technology in chemistry. All right. So there are things that happen in your life that give you stumbling blocks, but it will not necessarily stop you from winning at the long game, where the long game is you reaching your goals and enjoying yourself while you do it. And part of enjoying yourself is surmounting challenges and feeling so awesome that you were able to do it ultimately, or that you were able to let it go. I have a D in physics on my transcript. I didn't fail, but a D is just above failing. I am okay with that. I was able to let that go ultimately, and it didn't stop me from doing wonderful things in chemistry, and it did not stop me from loving physics. I love physics, and I feel like I'm good at physics now. Did I have a D the first time I took it? Absolutely. And that's okay. Okay. So I hope these tips can help you as you are embarking on your journey into the world of chemistry, taking college courses in chemistry, and really any other subject a lot of these tips will be relevant for. So please, I would love to hear if you have additional tips, and you can put those below. I don't know if this is a tip or not, but I did want to mention something about sleep. Sleep is very important. I'm sure you've heard that before. It is crucial to get enough sleep to help your cognitive abilities. But I heard something very interesting from a study that had to do with memory and with things like studying, doing homework, preparing for exams. And in this study, they determined that it was better to stay up late studying and then go to sleep late and then get up at the normal time to take your exam than to go to bed and get up early to study right before the exam, even if it was the same amount of time that would be spent studying. I thought that was extremely fascinating to hear about, because it is one of the few times that it actually gives a little pat on the head to the people who stay up late, to those night owls. I am one of those night owls. And it was interesting to hear it. And it was also something that I had never heard before, or had heard any studies being done before by neuroscientists. So there's a little pro tip. Again, it's one study. There's always different experiments being done for neuroscience and for brain cognition and learning things. But that was one that I recently heard about. So I wanted to pass that along to you as well. All right. So as I said, give me your ideas, share, not just for me, but for everyone watching this and reading the comments. If you have tips that you think help for succeeding and doing your best in chemistry classes, anything that you've done before, and whether it's in high school or college, all of those can help all of us do the best that we want to do and do the best that we can. And again, to enjoy it, because that's what it's all about, right? All right. Well, thank you for being here with me. As always, thank you so much for supporting this channel. I love the community we have here. I love all the beautiful comments and the requests that you give for content, and especially when you give me feedback on how you have done with either exam taking or things that you've learned that have helped you, or even how it has calmed you down and helped you to sleep. I think it is one of the most unexpected things, I guess I would say, that has happened to me in my life since starting this channel, is that I never expected that I would feel complimented by someone saying that they fell asleep and how grateful they are while I'm talking about chemistry. And yet, yes, it's a beautiful thing. So, all right. Well, thank you as always for being here with me and being part of this channel. And I will see you again next time.